Hey y'all, Melissa Mayo here, checking in from Geospatial Experiences. Remy Myers and I are really excited to bring you season 2 of the podcast. It will be ready in the coming weeks. In the meantime, we have a special treat for you. I sat down with Clint Brown, Director of Product Engineering at Esri. We discussed the new book authored by Jack Dangermond titled The Power of Where. It's an incredible compilation showcasing use cases and applications of GIS technology with hundreds of customer examples. There are 490 gorgeous maps throughout, countless customer interviews, and a super interesting foreword by Jack detailing some of Esri's early days. Clint was a member of the team who helped pull this Herculean effort together over the last 2 years. I had the opportunity to sit down with him and talk about the project from his perspective, to learn more about the efforts that went into making the book, along with a few of the elements he felt were especially interesting and meaningful. It's a really interesting behind-the-scenes conversation that I think you'll enjoy. Have a listen and be sure to order your copy of The Power of Where today. Available through Esri Press, Amazon, and wherever books are sold. So Clint, you mentioned earlier that Jack's new book, The Power of Where, you referenced it earlier in our conversation. It came out at the UC, or it debuted at the UC, and so it's been available for just a little bit. You, along with others, you had a team that went into helping pull this together and really implement Jack's vision and make this book happen, make it a reality. Can you tell us about it and what it was like to carry what I would assume would be a weighty assignment coming from Jack? I feel like that would be a tall order, a tall task.
But early on, Jack just wanted a book about the geographic approach. But Richard Saul Werman, I had to think of his name. I was going to call him Saul. Richard Saul Werman helped us put the book together. He worked a lot on the design and the layout of the book. He did some things that were really interesting, like it's a table of questions. Mm-hmm. Not a table of contents. It's kind of interesting.
That is really interesting. It's a different take.
And he did things like worked on a color palette. Like he really likes these just striking colors, like there's a lot of red in the book. He expanded the layout because the maps were so amazing in this book, and what it is and what it's become is really good. The parts that a lot of people really enjoy from the GIS communities of practice have been the preface, because Jack goes into a little bit of the history, not just of GIS, but also of Esri and of what he and Laura did in their early life. Like who was really influential for him in his work, the way he's been influential for so many of us. It's kind of amazing just to read that part of the book. But the other thing that's interesting about it is, Jack's the key author of it and the key visionary of the book. But the third author that's listed is the GIS community. And the reason for that is the GIS community were the ones that created all the content, the maps, and the methods that are being described. And when you go to the very back of the book, every page has I think there's 10 pages where there's not some kind of reference in the book to a user. It's the last 16 or so pages in the book. It's kind of an amazing concept to include users in that, but I think it makes total sense for what's happened with the industry. This is a snapshot in time, and I think it's a wonderful snapshot. I think all of us who are in a GIS community of practice could use this book to explain what we do. Like, I think all of us have had this experience. Oh, I can't wait to talk about what I do. And then we start talking about it, it just comes up flat for all of us. It just never comes across as meaningful as it is. Well, I think this book helps a lot with that, and is one way to think about the book. The other one is it's a good coverage of these 6 methods of GIS. Starts with geodata. Everybody's building geodata and sharing a lot of their data. It's geo-visualization, not just mapping, but 3D and time-enabled animations and things are just a big part of stuff. The next part of the book is really about analysis and storytelling. And story maps are really, it's like there's over 3 million story maps that have been created and published by our user community. The reason we know is we can find them on the web. So who knows how many are just inside of organizations. But it's just this amazing statement about the power of geography and the power of maps, and how like maps aren't just story maps. They aren't just these beautiful static maps that people build. They're also these apps now that people are creating. And this book really, I think, presents that in just such a beautiful way. And it's the user work. Every chapter includes a case study, and they're just amazing examples of work. Like, I'm looking at one right now that's for chapter 7, and it's about Los Angeles. And the way the caption for the first map starts is where in Los Angeles are people giving up their cars for a downtown lifestyle? And what you see these it's like this Art Deco color palette of these deep greens. It's just the most beautiful map you could imagine that represent these neighborhoods where people live. They live close to jobs, close to healthcare, close to entertainment and restaurants, close to schools, and they've chosen not to own cars. And they're also close to public transportation.
So this would be on page 234, and 235 for chapter 7. What is geoaccounting? Which I feel like is a new kind of concept, newer term. Maybe not new, but it's something that I don't know has always been used in this way.
Jack, when Jack was talking about this book initially, and he created a vocabulary of geos, and each of these chapters is one of those geos. The chapter 7 is on geoaccounting. This case study, by the way, is on page 234 and 235. If you're interested in learning more about it, it's a pretty cool story. But there's like every map in this book, there's a story behind it. And for me, this one really is quite appealing because I think it's where we want to begin to start on geo design, is with geoaccounting. And what I mean by that is geoaccounting is really not only about recording information, but accounting is also about reporting that information, summarizing and reporting information. And to do that reporting, there's a lot of synthesis that goes into reporting on geography. And it's what our community knows how to do so incredibly well. It just amazes me. But that's what this chapter is about. One of the great stories in that chapter that I talked about earlier is the story about the Johns Hopkins dashboards. And there's 2 snapshots of that dashboard. The first dashboard, which only covered China,
Mm-hmm.
and the last dashboard with like just the tragedy of what had happened over that short time span is just incredible. Like GIS made a big difference in that space. So that dashboard led to 8,000 additional dashboards for COVID by the end of the first year.
So as far as the book's concerned, Clint, do you have a favorite chapter? Is this your favorite chapter, the one that we've been looking at? I
don't have a favorite chapter.
Okay.
I have a lot of favorite ones. I will make a comment about the geo collaboration chapter because that's something people, geo collaboration, huh? Well, it's what users do every day. People have been sharing content for a while, but the idea that multiple organizations work on new kinds of problems, that's one of the big things that's true about this kind of modern community GIS, this web GIS. With web, you can bring content in from wherever it lives. As long as you have access to it, you can use it and combine it. And what people are doing is they're discovering all kinds of new possibilities for combining information. There's 2 examples in that chapter that are really cool. One shows this example of the Maasai tribal members in Tanzania, and where they're building these little corral areas and how they're managing that. It's very interesting. The other one that's really cool is the story about something called American Prairie. And this is a vision of a few people. They were looking at Montana, and I think some of the people had gone back and read the annals and the chronicles of Lewis and Clark and their expedition. This is over 200 years ago. Another chapter that's one of my favorites is chapter 6, which is on geo-collaboration. I think that's a new term for a lot of people, although we all understand that we're collaborating quite often with our peers who share their GIS content with us, but we also work on problems together for the same shared geographic locations. But this chapter has one example in particular that's really interesting to me, which is called, it's a thing on American Prairie. And that's an area that's been envisioned to be created in Montana. And it includes a lot of existing federal lands, but it's based upon the reports that were created as part of the annals for Lewis and Clark and their expedition in the early 1800s down the Missouri River. This shows the Missouri River and all of these existing conservation lands along there, plus larger areas that they're trying to expand. These areas would include existing ranch lands, private areas. There's a lot of people in Montana who have the same notion that Montana in the day of Lewis and Clark, they write about and wrote about seeing bison and pronghorn antelope as far as the eye could see. The hills would just be covered with these antelope and these bison. And later on, there were these periods of history where we just went out on these trains and just slaughtered these bison. Now, the idea that we can kind of restore some of those habitats and recreate some of almost recreate what it had existed at that time. seems like such a wonderful thing for humans to just strive to do. It's just something that's for the future, not for us. And it's just touched me so much. The other thing in that chapter that's along that same lines is just the work by educators and what they've been doing, like in K-12. There's a program that's talked about in that chapter also about something called the geospatial semester, run out of one of the colleges in the state of Virginia. This year they'll have 2,000 students that will take a year-long course where they learn GIS in high school. They'll be applying GIS in the same way that college classrooms do, because they're taking this class for college credit, and certainly it's at that same level of practice. It's just an interesting idea about how much GIS is changing and evolving.
I think that's amazing. I think that's awesome. How do you envision the book will make an impact on the geospatial community?
Well, I think every one of us will have something to learn. I know that when we were writing this book, we were learning an awful lot about what was going on. Like, regardless of how much you know about, there will be new things that are going to not only amaze you, but perhaps even shock you, just to see what's going on. And just this principle of what's happening now with this shared GIS on the web, that's a trend that's just beginning. But this book has done a good job, I think, to capture the aspects of how that's just beginning and what's going to happen.
It looks like it's an amazing read. I think that there's a lot of people who could get a lot out of it for sure if they pick it up and start working their way through it. So,
there were a number of us who worked on it. For example, there were about 9 of us who did a lot of the writing. Lauren Bennett and Helen Thompson, 2 spatial analysts, helped a lot with spatial analysis. Pat Cummins and Alan Carroll. Pat's kind of a subject matter expert for the use of GIS in multiple government agencies, especially natural resources agencies. Alan Carroll is the visionary and kind of leader behind story maps and what that's become. There were also some great writers. Christian Harder helped a lot with a lot of the writing. Mark Henry, an editor, helped us make the language approachable and accessible for people everywhere. And then we had a wonderful cartographer, Emily Merriam, who worked with members of the Living Atlas team on so many of these maps. It's just wonderful work that she did. And then finally, we had a designer who helped lay out the book and the chapters, Victoria Roberts.
And y'all spent almost 3 years working through it?
2 years.
2 years? Okay.
A little over 2 years from our first meeting with Jack. That happened in over a Thanksgiving week. We were meeting with Jack, and from that point on, we were working with him quite often, and especially in the last year. I'd say just a lot more often.
Trying to get it across the finish line, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. GIS is becoming, it's becoming more of the awareness about geography and GIS has really expanded, and I think that's what excites me about the book. Is I think this is the book that can be is the Johnny Appleseed of GIS the right kind of thing? It's the thing that I think will really spread the word and kind of the depth of what GIS is about. And I think we as a company have an obligation to deliver on that promise. So we want to continue to build great technology, continue to build a great practice, but also really reinforce these kind of the ethics behind GIS. There's so much that we can improve upon in those spaces.
I think that's awesome. The book feels like a catalyst, almost a catalyst for inspiration, not only for the people who are already in the field, but the field of GIS, but also people who are going to be coming up and getting exposed to it and really showcasing, like you said, some of these, to a whole new generation, these ideas and these concepts.
That's really nice.
Mm-hmm. That wraps up today's episode. Please feel free to reach out with your comments, or if you have an interesting topic that you would like to hear, please let us know. Thanks again for your time, and tune in for our next podcast.